Good morning.
Good morning. This is totally classic. We are still asking the same question we were asking 2 weeks ago. Brief break for a COVID infection, essentially, linearly in terms of the release of this show. We're still asking the same question. I think we've already started to somewhat answer it, at least that it is our question, is woke a religion, is tenable as a theory already. I was like, oh, this is a tenable theory. I don't know if we've answered the question. That's an entirely different thing of like, oh, is this theoretically possible? And not in the grand scheme of like anything's theoretically possible, but like, oh, okay, yeah, no. This has enough correlation. It has traction. So we're gonna keep using that traction to keep running it down. I'm Brendan McNamara.
And I am Andy Swindler. And I feel like it's worth pointing out that I would probably be more likely to attach a stigma or a negativity to religion than you.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Deeply religious person, as a Christian. So that came to me, like, that's not the intention of the question, is to imply that woke being a religion is necessarily bad. Is that your assessment?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, calling it that would not in and of itself be a bad thing. My whole hope, the whole reason I've found this a tenable theory and been sort of viewing the world as this is the question, the answer to this question is woke a religion is yes. I was like, oh, I think this could be helpful for both sides of people who flipping hate wokeness and people who love wokeness. Is that if you recognize what you're talking about is really more in the realm of religious like apprehension, then that would gentle how you communicated it to other people. You would do so with a different level of humility. You wouldn't, as we talked about, and there was a senatorial hearing or whatever, where someone sort of violated out loud, sort of didn't violate, actually just questioned sort of a tenet of wokeness, let's say, and then was quite immediately labeled like a transphobic, right? So I was like, oh, that's sort of like, and that's meant as an insult because it can't be meant. There wasn't enough information to mean it, the word as it actually means. So I was like, oh, okay, that would gentle experiences like that, where you just be like, oh, well, you don't understand the sort of the tenets of the religion, in which case, oh, well, let me explain. I have to explain the entire worldview. Same way as if I'm a Christian, like it doesn't make Jesus died for your sins. That I can't say that if you say, well, so now why would he have to die for your sins? Well, that's Christophobic. Like I wouldn't do that, right? You'd be like, well, I have to explain what Christ means, what a Messiah is, what original sin is, whether it would have to figure out whether that's a legitimate claim or, you know what I mean? There's so many presuppositions there that like, whereas, so most Christians, other than like what's that, Westboro Baptist or whatever, I might just be like, shut up, or whatever. Most people, and in some ways, those would be seen as like literally the like. I just use them as because I think both in the world of Christendom and outside Christendom, Westboro Baptist is those are the people who like protest like funerals and stuff like that. You know what I mean? They would kind of be seen as like the quote unquote worst. Like those are the worst Christians. Now maybe inside Christianity, not necessarily, but like in general, that was something that a Christian and non-Christian could shake hands and be like, yes, that is not how we roll. But I see that kind of behavior manifesting in the woke culture as it is revealed in pop culture or in like mass media. So it's like if people could understand that it was a religion, it would gentle them. And people from the outside, even looking at like a Westboro Baptist, to go, those people seem terrible. But instead of just being like, I flipping hate you, to go, oh, okay, kind of Russell Brand it. Russell Brand had like members of the Westboro Baptist Church on his show when he had a show on like FX or whatever. And it was great. I was like, this is fantastic. Because he was just like, instead of just being like, well, you seem like awful bigots, he was just like, okay, well, wait. And so why would that be? And why does that make sense? I was just talking to, and I think that's healthy. I think that's good. I think people, if we could look at it as such, we could both kind of gentle our approach for one another instead of just being like, you're this. No, you're this. So yes, I mean it as a positive thing in terms of socializing. And yes, with no negative stigma on the word religion.
Got it. I think I'm hearing you use the word gentle, like a verb. Is that right?
Yes.
Gentle our approach.
Yes.
I'm unfamiliar with that kind of expression. Could you say more about that?
Yeah. I mean, I in general love to turn nouns, adjectives, into verbs and verbs into nouns. And, it's a fun way to play with language, which is a lot of what we talk about in here, and how much play is allowable and how much play is wildly confusing, or how much play is wrong, for example, or like, incorrect. And I write poetry and whatnot. So I'm also like, oh, well, we can do anything, as long as, it just might be wildly confusing. But gentle, I would say most especially for me is literally already used as a verb in the series of books, The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan, in the future where women have access to sort of, think of it like the force, let's be honest. It's like the sort of power that exists. And men do too, but when men access it, they go crazy. They eventually go insane. Until, I won't spoiler alert, like what happens later. But at least initially, that's how it goes. So any men who can access the one power, the source in many ways, they eventually go crazy. So the women, typically, the sort of ruling class of power women, will find those men early on once they start manifesting their ability to manipulate magic, and cut them off from the source, so they won't be able to do more and more harm, and they won't go out of their minds. And that process is called gentling.
Wow.
So that, which is, of course, for people it's happening to, they're literally being forced to cut off from the thing that gives them the most life in their life. You know what I mean? It's a quandary, right? But the language to soften the blow of what they are doing is called gentling. So, oh yes, that man has been gentled. We need to gentle him as soon as possible. His power grows too strong. That sort of thing.
It reminds me of this quote from Margaret Mead that I've never seen anywhere other than an essay my dad wrote about fatherhood and philosophy, Fathering for Freedom, I think it was called. And the quote is, every known human society rests firmly on the learned, nurturing behavior of men. Which I could tease us out for a future discussion around patriarchy. I know that's come up a few times. But one thing you're highlighting just around language is just how essential that is to woke culture.
Yeah.
And there was just a couple days ago, a team I'm on. I don't know. I feel like I never used this expression, but for some reason I was used the expression "no man's land," and I was gently corrected, or potentially corrected or upgraded to say "no person's land." And what's funny about that?
Interesting.
So this I think this is a good sort of thread to take us into like the language of it, because to me that's probably the most obvious and sort of tangible way that woke culture shows up. Is some people might call it policing. I would say interrogating. I think it's actually, I think we both agree interrogating language and understanding these things is important. I just started reading a book called Hospicing Modernity, and she uses the term wording the world. Like that's a lot of what we did with the English language and colonialism. It's like we want to define things and control things and sort of put them in a static form. When I'm with you, like turning things into verbs, like motion, to me, motion is the actual natural state of the universe. I think everything's, that's sort of obvious at a biological level. We're all these little cells like humming. And but anyway, so I looked it up, no man's land, and I was like, oh, interesting. So this was a World War I reference, I believe. And, and it was like, so no man's land is actually pretty technically accurate.
It has to.
Unless we could get into, maybe there were, men in that were that now would identify differently or whatever. That's going to be a big part of our discussion today.
Yeah.
But I was like, oh, no, really, that's not no person's land. There were like no women on that battlefield.
Sure. Yeah. And it's the phrase too. So then even it doesn't matter. I mean, the phrase is no man's land. So you can't be like, well, it's no person's land. You're like, well, that's not what the phrase is. So no one.
True, but that's a lot of what happens in woke culture is we sort of.
Interesting.
I mean, think about it, like all the way down to Latinx and a lot of things we've talked about in other ways. But to me, what I'm more interested in is actually undermining and rewriting violent metaphors. Like even on my team, we have a little practice of doing this. Even though something as simple as like kill two birds with one stone. Yeah, we're like, why does everything have to be violent? So we say get two birds stoned at once.
Yeah.
So there's little adjustments like that that seem pretty innocuous. So to me, it was like, oh, I don't want to necessarily change that. I'd rather stop using the phrase because it's actually referring, it's a war metaphor. It's actually relating to this war and this violence.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I always feel like with language, because I love to play with language, but and maybe we'll even get into this. To me, it's almost like there's a magnetism between language usage and strict semantics, or even any concept. And there's a certain level of play that you can engage with with magnets, where you can push them towards each other and they can kind of feel that friction. You can pull them away and they start to attract. You can try different angles to feel, but at some point, there's a point of no return when you break the connection. And language is rooted in that. So if you turn it past the sort of midway point, then all of a sudden it doesn't, like the magnets lose their interplay, or it's getting to full rejection mode or whatever, right? You know what I mean? So then you're just like, no, that has nothing. So you can, it's so fun basically to use something that is both concrete and malleable, and you want to use it as best as you can without breaking it. It's like a toy in that way. Like if you break the toy, then no one gets to use it. And so I that's where I see a lot of the tension arise, is people are like, no, is where you take language too far or whatever. Or the whole thing of like, no, you don't play with it that way, which is really kind of, this is a both sidism, in that people have that demand. That's like, well, no, that can't, like, for example, I was like, you can't change no man's land, because that's literally the phrase. Saying you have to say no person's land means we're literally starting today in this meeting, and we have to wait 75 years until this phrase is as useful as it is now. So that doesn't make this is the conservative element, right? Which is like, that doesn't make any sense. Like everyone knows what no man's land is. There's movies called No Man's Land. It's been cited for hundreds and hundreds of years. So saying no person's land is like, that's brand new. So why would we start a new thing when again, this is conservatism, right? Why would we start a new thing when the old thing isn't broken? And I think that's where a lot of disruption comes too, is where like once the play gets beyond play, and then we have to examine, oh wait, are we being playful here? Are we examining it? Or are we breaking the very thing? But I also believe within woke, the intention, as with religion, is to, if not break everything, to break things. Like woke is here to break things. Yeah. And cause problems and stress people out and make people angry and offend people, because all religions do that. All religions like happen. Like Jesus, right? Whoever it was, like, I use Jesus a lot, because I'm a Christian, but Jesus also pops up in like most world religions. Like he's a figure in Islam and Judaism, and he's referenced in Buddhism. Hinduism doesn't necessarily talk about him, but they do have like theories or whatever. But he's like, he pops up all around the world. And he came and he was like, I came not to bring peace, but a sword. Like I came to set mother, father against son, daughter-in-law against mother. Like, so plainly came, he was like, what I'm up to is going to be divisive. And any change movement at all has been fundamentally also divisive. So I think, so that's, I mean, I don't say that the rupture, I'm just most conservative around language. So that's an easy place for me to go and feel very secure and not like wildly triggered about it. You know what I mean? Like if someone said no person's land to me, I'd just be like, no, that's ridiculous. Right. I was like that. Yeah, I was like, you'll lose. We can have that conversation right now, but what you're saying is untenable. It has like, it's not so, but I can do that without being like mad. I wouldn't be mad at someone who said, well, let's say no person's language. I would laugh about it because it's a funny joke. But if someone meant that for real, I'd be like, oh, no, that's not real at all. You know what I mean? Whereas, so I like to go to places where I feel confident, not to dominate, but to know I'm going to be less triggered and less likely to get violent or angry or all that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I actually just looked it up again. Thank you. Because I realized it's the modern reference is World War I, but you're right, it's been actually in use for almost 1,000 years, ostensibly, according to the ultimate tome of knowledge known as Wikipedia.
I've been hitting up the OED hard lately, man. I got to tell you, I mean, OED has been so good for me lately. Although you have to pay for it. Did you know that? It's the only bummer.
Yeah.
You have to the online, which is cool because it's exhaustive, but some things you can slip in. I don't understand. You'll put some words in, and then the whole, like I sent you a page today on gender, and I was like, wait a second, this is like the whole listing. you know?
I think, yeah, I think for our interrogation of language, it's quite important.
Yeah.
And I think a couple things coming up for me. So one is just, I tend to I can go abstract and kind of go deep. And like we were saying earlier, everything is energy, man.
Yeah.
And one of those, I mean, these are just vibrations. I mean, language itself is quite tenuous and fragile, right? Like, just try to listen to somebody who's speaking a different language. They're just slightly different vibrations, really, using basically the same equipment.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, the coding is all gone, right? Like we've lost all ability to decode. So I think there is something to that. Like it is, maybe it feels like a slippery slope where it's like, holy crap, like we can't just like annihilate all language, because then it's sort of just the fabric, one of the pieces of fabric of how we hold together. I think the argument a lot of times for woke and it is intended to be disruptive, because it's disrupting, a language of imperialism that has led to systems that are very, very locked up with our economic system and politics, and at least at a minimum designed to help us question those concepts and ideas, and then at the extreme end being like, no, we need to subvert this, we need to dismantle this, we need to destroy and rearrange all of this,
start over.
A lot of times not done in a way that's particularly circumspect. I think one of the things, you've done more research into just even some of the terminology that's introduced in some of these communities. When is that really helpful, and when is that to the people it's theoretically designed to help or lift up who are marginalized, and when is it not only maybe not addressing sort of a zero sum, because it's trading sort of that focus on probably a minority population for the majority population, and then in other cases is it not even actually serving the minority population in the way that we imagine it might. And I personally, and this is just a personality thing with us, find myself to be extremely liberal in this way. Which, as a student of language and writing, often quite formally, that's interesting. For me, I don't know. I think this is a good opportunity for me to interrogate that for myself. Like, why am I so attracted to that subversion, that wokeness? And some of that is because I really did buy into the idea that that's uplifting and helping marginalized voices and helping people be seen who historically aren't, or in some ways are not only not seen, but are, where violence is actually being enacted. But there's also a piece of it, I think, for me, that it's just, and this is the part I think I'm most interested in interrogating as somebody who, I don't go around saying I'm woke. I don't like that term, kind of like the way that I don't like saying I'm an ally. It's just kind of like, I don't know, it's not about the label, but I'm attracted to the energy of it, because I've somehow really bought into the idea that, like, oh, no, this needs to be subverted, this needs to be interrogated, this needs to be flipped inside out. And there's a kind of rightness there. I know that came up last time, rightness or self-righteousness, about like, oh, I don't know, like I think I'm really attracted to the idea that it's really the one way I think we're quite different, where I and it's funny to talk to you about it, because I hadn't really interrogated it very deeply, but like, of course we should throw out the way a term has been used for 3,000 years, because we just learned something new. And of course, which in some cases, let's interrogate that and let's figure out when that may be useful, but also holding that, well, if we just did that for all language, then it would all basically unravel. So,
or if you do it in communities first, then that explicitly makes your community an enemy of the people, general population, right? This is the wild thing, is there haven't been any woke martyrs yet. So that's one way in which it is not like a religion. But maybe there have, I don't know, the community more than I do, but that's inevitable with the way it's proceeding. And that's pretty much how, that's how Christianity grew, right? They killed Jesus, and then they killed every single disciple except for John. Then they killed like Paul, who's like, whatever, according to Time magazine, one of the probably top 5 most important people in human history. And like Abraham, one of the most important human beings in human history, in that like the Abrahamic religions now influence the entire world. In terms, wars, both positive and negative, obviously. But so like people had to die for a generation because they said the opposite of what everyone else was saying. And so that's the interesting thing that's happened with woke, is woke people, in some ways, I almost feel like woke people are looking for martyrdom. Also because it's necessary. You know what I mean? People die when this is in every revolution in history. But what woke is proposing, even just in the language usage, is revolution. What Christianity is proposing is revolution. It's in many ways, Christianity is sort of it's very akin to woke, but it's the opposite of woke because it's not seeking systemic transformation as much as individual transformation. Although I feel like woke is the goal is systemic transformation, but the impetus often is on individual transformation and then accruing essentially converts, right? Where then you then convince, the more people you convince to then do this, then will then lead to systemic conversion, essentially, right? All of this being conversion into, the energetic excitement is doing something righteous. Walking the path of righteousness is the obsession of all religions. It's the obsession of wokeness, right? And then this is an interesting thing too, though, which is the way in which woke has come out of, I think, the sort of general social, construct of moral relativism applied, the world of my truth, where people were saying that for a long time. In some ways, it was great. This is what I think Trump was best at, and I'm gonna use my hands more when I say Trump. What Trump was great at is Trump was the my truth president. He was like leading, he literally did anything. He said, if anyone disagree with him, he was just like, no, that's not true. I think this, so that's what's true. Like he was the my truth president. And so we all got to see what it would be like if we had a president. And Giuliani even defended him that way. Well, there's your truth and there's my truth. And you're like, oh no. In some ways it was great. So moral relativism kind of blew up because of Trump. But in some ways, I feel like people left the my truth movement and then we're like, let's look at what truth is. And then the truths that we don't think are truths, let's change those. You know what I mean? And so it becomes like walking this rebellious path of righteousness and picking up the right cause and chasing it. I mean, I think that's good. And the thing I like about it, because I have people who are still steeped in the moral relativistic, my truth world, which is, I think, you probably run into folks like that in the new age thing, right? Where there is no right and wrong, really, except what you or I say it is, which means you can't enact social change then, because social change would be an improper violation of everyone's individual sovereign ability to determine for themselves what's right and wrong. So, but that just doesn't seem practical, right? You know what I mean? And the thing that I've run into in terms of when I argue with folks or have lost friendships over is something came up a couple times this week for me in one of this like letter of like piss off from one of my friends. They said, what was it? You seem to be very concerned with being right. And I was like, oh, wait, from her worldview, I think she's expressing that as like, you see where you're kind of like outside of the orthodoxy, you're being heretical right now. But I was like, no, of course I'm obsessed with being right. I wouldn't do anything unless I thought it was right at all. I wouldn't feed my body. I wouldn't feed myself if I didn't think it was right. I wouldn't walk across this floor if I didn't think I was correct. I was right in my assumption that the floor is going to hold me up. You know what I mean? So I think it's part of the energy of being a human being. And so it makes perfect sense why you'd be attracted to it in that way. The same way, like I understand like energetically why I'm attracted to Christianity or any religion, because it says something's wrong with the world, something's fundamentally wrong with the world. And then here's how you are fixed or fix yourself, depending on what the paradigm of religion, whether it's a works-based religion or not, or whatever. Like Christianity isn't, but like Catholicism kind of is. And they're kind of obviously quite closely related. And then how you change that, like how do you go about and then basically make the world a better place? I mean, how could that not energize people? Like, how can you not get excited about that? And that's why I'm excited about it too. But and then it's always just like, well, is this a good way to change the world or not? Or is it causing more harm? And that, gets into our whole harm reduction, cost benefit analysis kind of thing. So yeah, I totally get that.
Yeah, for me, it especially in these books I'm reading right now, like which in a lot of ways is confirming what I was already believing, just about, call it modernity, or she also says, which is synonymous with coloniality, which is a term I had been exploring the terms colonization or colonialism, but coloniality being a more of a way of being that emerges in terms of our culture from being colonized. And so to me, that is the virtue of it, broadly, of woke language in particular, just subverting or rearranging. But the challenge I have with it, which is true of the energy of I think woke or some of the topics we've talked about, is, when is that just really punching somebody in the nose and not actually meeting them where they are?
Yeah.
Is that, to me, that's the greater, it's harder actually to meet somebody where they are, especially if they have really different viewpoints. That's like a lot of the whole point of this show.
Yeah.
And so to me, like, when are we changing something and then assuming that is the way it has to be, or that is the right way? I mean, rightness comes up a lot in there.
Yeah. It has to. Yeah.
And a friend of mine actually was, newer to using pronouns, and this was pretty recently, maybe in the last year or two, and was at some kind of training or workshop. And I think she just asked about them. This is kind of resonant of a lot of the things I think you're curious about, is like just how people react when they're even just asked. And so she didn't get pronouns, or I think just asked, can you let me know about pronouns? Like, what is this? And really did not get a good reaction. Like, got a pretty hostile reaction about, oh, you should know this, or you're the bad guy essentially because you don't know this piece.
Yeah.
And so to me, that phenomenon, I'm not saying that's everywhere, but that phenomenon, and I've seen it too, and I think you have a lot on the internet.
Yeah.
That to me is rooted deeply in probably a kind of wounding or fear. Like the most generous explanation I have for that is that somebody who is deeply harmed and marginalized, that this provides them a voice, this provides them a kind of stability to express themselves. And even being questioned about it doesn't feel like an innocent question. It feels like a kind of attack, or a kind of like, because that I think the perception is like, well, that's the whole world, that's the dominant culture, and kind of like, oh, I thought we were in this group here to be protected, but so did my friend, right? She also thought she was in this group to be curious and open and learn together.
Yeah.
So that, I think that's almost all roads for me lead back to just emotional regulation and emotional maturity. Just how can we hang in those moments? And even if the answer is, you know what, I don't have the resources or the capacity to explain this to you right now. Like, let me 4,000 things you could get on Google or whatever.
Yeah. Or let me bring you. I think if you're in person, you should always just be like, who's the person who can tell you about that? You know what I mean? Who just be like, oh, you know who loves talking about that? And you just walk over it and you're like, here's Keith or whatever. Keith will totally break it down. And then you can ask him all the questions. That's interesting, because see, I would assume, and I could be wrong about this, and this is I want to examine two things. Colonality. I'm going to hold on to that. I'm going to hold this in this hand so I don't forget. I want to look at the colonality or the colonization examination, because I think it might be super germane. But I also wanted to examine, on the other hand, when you talked about sort of language as vibration, which it absolutely is, because all sound is vibration, right? And it's vibrations that we agree mean something. That vibration means this, and that vibration means this, and we still have confusion, obviously, from place to place, but essentially. And, we're making a lot of the same sounds, except with rare exceptions amongst the languages in the world. A lot of times it's the same sounds arranged differently. And I feel like, because again, you've told me how many Zoom calls you've been on, and that you're in spaces with actual people who are present there in front of you in some way or another. And almost all my interaction has to do with the written language. I was like, oh, I wonder if those things proceed differently. Like I tend to think of I see the, and I think I am more afraid, thinking of emotional dysregulation, I am more afraid of in-person conversation vibration, because I think it can go off the rails quicker. I think it's a less safe means of communication. But you're, because I'm not as naturally empathic as you either. So I literally don't have the detection software. I don't have the radar to know when things go awry. And my natural radar software tends to, if there's a ping, I go towards it. So I go towards tension. So then if I feel like tension energy, you might be like, oh, things are getting weird, I'm going to breathe. If I hear tension energy, I'm like, I'm zoomed towards it. And that seems to cause further dysregulation in other people. So I'm like, I love the written language. So for safety's sake, everything that I've said is captured and I don't delete anything ever. Unless I made a terrible typo and no one's commented on it or whatever. But I don't ever delete anything. So then everything I've said is out there. And I found that so helpful. Like I had this big friend breakdown, but everything we'd done except for one Zoom call. And I was like, why didn't we record the call? Almost all of our Congress was on text message or Marco Polo or an email. So when I was like trying to figure out, wait, what happened here? I could literally go through 90% of our Congress and see it. And it's like, it's validated. And I was like, okay, good. Because sometimes in those situations, you're like, am I crazy, right? Did I say that? Did I say it in this way or blah, blah, blah? And it also takes tone out of it because people are like, don't like my tone. So as I'm working on that, I just try to stay in the realm of written language because I think it's safer. Whereas you interact, I think, much more in verbal language. And so but I think us being very different people, I was just want to remark, I was like, oh, I think there are reasons why we tend those directions. But also interesting to hear how, like, where things flare up too. Like if people get more reactive, like that, for example, where they're like offended or angry at someone for asking a question, does that happen more in the verbal language realm?
Yeah.
Or is that anything you've noticed?
Well, I'm thinking a couple of things. It is intriguing, and I feel like I'm going to zero in on pronouns here a bit.
Yeah.
That's a very tangible thing that has a lot of dimensions to it. I'm reminded of, this was pre-pandemic. This was like more than 3 years ago. I was invited to speak on a panel about, I think it was called Wired for Work, but it was about gender. But I think it's a good example because like we weren't, to my knowledge, it was like a women's group as I'm recalling.
Yeah.
And it inspired me to write. I think I sent you that blog I wrote about that because that was like after that panel was I like had all these thoughts about just the nature of gender at work and men and women and in the workplace and all these interactions. But I remember, I think that was probably fairly close to when I was starting to use pronouns and even just write them on like my name tag. So one thing I'm thinking as you're talking is like, well, pronouns, there's a way to announce it when we're checking in, like say we're in a circle or a group setting. Yeah. And we're all going one by one and saying, hey, my name is, so it's quite common in a lot of circles I'm in to say your name and your pronoun and your location. And and in this case, it was fascinating because it was a corporate kind of environment, maybe kind of conservative. And I wrote my pronouns, he, him, on my name tag. And like, I met one of the organizers when I walked in and just whatever the kind of cocktail hour. And she laughed, like she thought it was a joke. She had no awareness of like why I was doing that or what that meant, or maybe just because I think somewhat obviously present male. It is interesting when I shave, somebody said it's quite a different presentation. Like I even appear a little more androgynous. Just I think I have less defined, traditionally masculine features like a chiseled jawline or something like that.
Oh, gotcha.
But anyway, I would not deny that I most people would guess I'm a man, and I do accept that identity. So that you just made me remember that, but I just thought was fascinating. And I think I turned it into a little teaching moment about like, and at that time I was super like, oh, this is the way we're going to be doing it from now on. I mean, that was essentially like, once I learned pronouns, I was like, oh shit, like this is the way to do it. Because my understanding was this helps people, this helps everybody feel included, right? This is, somebody say who is transgender. So maybe they present traditionally, male, but the reality is they're a trans male or trans man, so they were biologically assigned female at birth. And but they but maybe it's hard to tell, right? Or maybe like it can be, there is a cognitive dissonance there. I mean, I remember there's a theater group here, Collaboration, that I love because they're all often doing programming around social justice kind of issues, and then they do a little talk back after. And I remember that was one of the first times. This was several years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And there was a trans person doing one of the plays and really exploring some of these issues, and it was like their own life story. And in the talk back, it was, I had a lot of fear to even express this, but I was just like, well, the reality is like I found myself confused. Like I found myself my brain was like trying to figure out which box they fit in. Like it was, and I think that's part of what we're trying to undermine here is putting everything in these nice little neat boxes, or these predictable boxes, or associating one kind of categorical way of looking, or a number of characteristics of looks and appearance to somebody's identity and somebody's personality and all these other things. Because at large, I think that is quite damaging because it's limiting. I'm super liberal in this way because I'm just like, I think everybody is this unique, amazing, beautiful expression, and I want to see that come out. So I think my attraction to the pronoun piece is a function of like, does this help somebody feel more expressed? Does this reduce the likelihood that somebody who appears one way is going to constantly have to be correcting people, like constantly, because they're going to assume one pronoun that is not the way that person identifies, and their whole life is like, oh, actually I'm a she, like it's it's cool, but or maybe it's not cool, so
maybe not.
But there is one nuance I've learned more recently, I'd say, is there are groups that, and I totally on board with this, like I don't think I ever like was in a group where we forced people to say their pronouns, but it might have felt like that because it was a lot of the culture, the culture of, I've definitely been in a lot of groups that I think fit into this kind of woke religion where like, oh, like we have to use pronouns here because that's the way this revolution works. And if we don't do that, then we're not being inclusive, and we're not doing all these things. But the nuance there is that if somebody hasn't come out yet, say as being trans, if we're forcing them to speak their pronoun, but they're not yet at a point where they've expressed to their community or to that group that they're trans, that they're maybe using a pronoun that sounds and looks differently than most people think they look, that we're actually asking them to lie about their identity, and speak more to how the rest of us may think they look, or the box they fit in, rather than how they truly authentically feel about their expression and their identity. And to me, that's even more damaging. So there's that component of that falls into the, oh gosh, we're not even really helping the marginalized folks by forcing this pronoun thing. And then there's the larger thing, which I feel like you bring up more often, which is, and what are we doing to the majority? Like if it's about inclusivity, what happens to all the people who are like, what the fuck are pronouns? Like what? Like maybe I'm willing to like learn, but please don't blast me for that. Or maybe I'm not willing to learn because to your point, we haven't done that forever. So
Well, it's interesting. The this is why I want to bring up the colonization thing too. Well, and lies are interesting. Oh gosh, which one do I chase? Okay, let's chase the lie one first, because that's what you said. So that's interesting. And that makes logical sense too, that like, oh, this is how we have to be careful about pronouns or demanding them, because someone might be undecided. They'd literally be like, I can't answer that. B, if I was ever in that group where you had to say your pronouns, I would absolutely make a joke out of it, because that's what comedy is. You have to break the routine. And so I think it's funny. C, the interesting about lies, right? What if you cause someone to lie? So they would have to say something, or they would feel compelled to say something, have compelled speech contrary to that which they perceived to be true, which is the big, it's like the big kind of, I would say even the primary argument about people not using pronouns that don't match biological sex is that slash gender would be that then they're lying, right? So then if they're like, if I can't perceive you as what you claim to be, then at some point I either have to go, okay, I'm wrong, my senses, but a lot of times people are just having to lie. They're like, I don't believe you. So then I'm saying something that's not true. This is like I brought this up to you too, the Star Trek Next Generation, what is it, Four Lights? I always forget the Chain of Command. It's like a 2-part episode where Captain Picard gets kidnapped and then he gets tortured. And throughout the torture, the torturer, who the actor just recently died, David something, he keeps trying to get Picard, amongst other tortures, to just say that there's like one more light or one less light than there actually is in the room. So if he can get him to say something that he perceives to be false, he will break something fundamentally in him, and then everything else will flow from there. That's like, if he can we know that in the scene, right? If he can just say that, we'll be like, oh no, it's all over. He never breaks because he's Picard. Spoiler alert. Sorry, I should have said that beforehand. But whatever, it came out 40 years ago. So with the pronoun use, and I think this is why online, again, I mostly function in the written realm. There's a whole thing on Twitter that people are like, pronouns in their bio. And then once people click and see pronouns in their bio, they're like, I'm not going to listen to that person anymore. They're like, that person is kind of dead to me. And I see that I don't see that in conservative spaces. I see this in like Democrat liberal spaces only. So it's really, I don't know people, especially on Twitter. I don't really know any conservative people. So they're like, oh, I'm done. So then this is this weird schism amongst like liberals and progressives or whatever. But it's explicitly progressive to, like you're talking about, alter language and change the way in which it's the definition of progress. We're trying to push past, we're trying to make progress here. Anyway, so I thought that was interesting. So then you have this double lie scenario, right? So if I see someone and by all my ability to evaluate and validate my own senses and trust that I am able to ascertain the truth as much as anybody, and I see someone, let's say you, right? And I'm like, you're a male. And then if you say, well, no, I'm a she, then I go, of course I have cognitive dissonance, because I'm like, wait a second, is that true or not? And then do I use, and I don't know I don't interact with enough people who are trans to know how to deal with this, because I'm always like, oh, this is such a long conversation we have to get into now. I can't just do it. I would never just do something because someone says to do it. I mean, this is why I had cops called at me, put a mask on. Why? I don't put a mask on just because someone has a sign to put a mask on, right? So then I wouldn't, just because someone says, well, I'm a she, if I'm like, wait a second, my immediate instinct, wait, is this person lying to me? And then if they truly believe that they are that, then they aren't lying to me. They're speaking, quote unquote, their truth, right? But then if my truth is the opposite, then I can't say she to you, for example. I can't say it. I can't say it because then I'd be lying. So then this is where you get into the minority majority thing, where you're like, pronouns constantly introduce that dilemma of like, oh wait, do I agree with you or do I not agree with you when someone says their pronouns? Especially now that we're like in the flexible realm of like, if you're going to take your senses and your ability to evaluate reality visually, by smell, touch, all the things, like down to touching genitalia, whatever. Not that people do that in regular greeting. I don't shake dicks as to say hi to people. But who knows what the future may hold.
It's like Crocodile Dundee.
Yeah, exactly. Special handshake. I went prurient. But it's that.
Kids look up that reference. Just
but it's a constant tension in that way for everyone. So that's the interesting, when you started bringing up majority and minority, then if you cause that tension of like, oh no, do I have to lie to the majority in order to protect the, oh no, do I have to lie of the minority, then that pragmatically is a terrible decision. It's an easy decision to not, you would never do that. But I don't think pragmatism is the way in which we proceed ethically, right? And nor does any religion. So that's where this becomes an interesting, I think it's why pronouns are such a good tension point so I'm glad you brought them up.
Yeah, a couple of things come up. One is I'll admit, like, it is easier for me.
Yeah.
The binary is easier. And then I think this is a kind of a ongoing discussion you and I are having just about
Yeah.
that the nature of, I don't know, biological reality and perception and identity and all these things.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and it's easier for me actually when a trans person is moving to the other side of the binary. So I now am, you know, interacting very regularly with a trans woman.
Yeah.
I've never misgendered her because I like, she presents as a woman. Like that's so, you know, like, I don't know, in a way that simplifies it, because it's kind of like, oh, you're adding all these cues that make it simpler for me, because when I see you, I think to your point, like when I see you, my brain is like, you know, filing you in the woman category already. So I don't
Interesting.
I have to do all this extra work to remember that you want to be referred to as a she, because that just feels natural. What's much harder for me is the non-binary, like the space in between, or the undefined space. I'm getting better at it, and I'm not alone. Like, this is, I know a lot of people who struggle the most with this. I mean, first of all, just the grammar part, which I got over pretty quickly, but I'm, you know, for better or worse, I can be a grammar snob. So just the pluralization of the pronoun was always,
that can be just tricky. Yeah. It just always sounds awkward.
I've gotten used to it though. It is possible to get used to it. And it seems funny all the way down to I mean, this stuff goes really far out, like thinking about the gender expression of our pets, or even like a bug that we meet. I was talking to one of my guys in one of my men's group about that, and it was like, you know, he was talking to this to his kid about this bug. And then I think I was like sort of making a joke, just like, oh, well, what gender was the bug? He was like, well, we just called it a they, you know, because we didn't really know. And you know, I kind of accept that, and I'm weaving even that in, like with my pets, and being like, well, she was biologically assigned female, so I call her that. But of course, she doesn't speak English, so I can't really ask her. And you know, which you might think is a total joke, like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Well, it is funny. Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, I think anyone practicing it knows it seems funny. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's because, again, that, like we talked about, like the gender, like in order for pronouns to make sense, you have to then go into the gender theory, which is relatively recent, and then say that gender and sex are separate. And so when we say pronouns here in this space, we mean as refers to gender, which we consider a separate concept from, like, there's a lot of religious underpinnings. Like, in some ways, pronouns, doing it early seems crazy to me, because that's like, listen, I put on my signature on my Twitter, and people do the same thing they do to pronouns. They see Christ, they see what I write, bondslave of Christ. I wouldn't tell people to, like, in Christianity, be like, oh, you say your name and then you say bondslave of Christ. People would be like, slave? What slave? Dude, that is, you don't lead with that, because it's complicated, man. So you like, or it's not nuanced. It just takes some explanation. You know what I mean? So pronouns take an enormous amount of explanation and then argument too. So it's like, we're basing this on this thing and this theory, but the problem, but listen, it's also very effective religiously, because you're breaking the thing. It's literally like having someone stand up and be like, an alcohol, like in Alcoholics Anonymous, here's my name and I'm an alcoholic. Or if you had people in Christianity stand up and go, hi, my name is Brendan and I'm a sinner. You know what I mean?
Right.
So essentially that's what pronouns do. They then they sort of like state out loud a whole bunch of presuppositions, you know what I mean? Which is, I think, where it runs into trouble with the sort of general population, which is why the general population is like, that's a lot. That's a lot to have to agree to get to that point. You know what I mean? Which you've already agreed to. You know what I mean? You've already looked at and researched and be like, oh, okay, I find this argument convincing. I found the theory convincing. And therefore, and so does this person I'm talking to, in which case, why wouldn't you then interchange in that way? And it makes perfect sense. You know what I mean? Within the paradigm of, let's say, you talking to this person you were just saying you interact with, then it would make perfect sense. Like, it wouldn't be like, that's not funny or weird. You know what I mean? Because you've both kind of agreed to this language, essentially. You're a tribe of two in those moments, you know?
Yeah. And there's, I'm going to loop back to something in there in a second, but you know, the theoretical value of normalizing pronoun usage is to make it easier for someone who perhaps has a pronoun that doesn't seem to match up with the way most people perceive them, or traditional sort of gender cues, visual gender cues.
I don't know if it does that though, right? Because if everyone's if most people, and that will be the case statistically, the majority of people are going to say pronouns that do match there. So in some ways, it actually makes it more weird. Because if you say male, and then there's a woman who says woman, and then there's someone who I perceive as a woman who says male, that's actually when I'm going to go, that's the one of these things is not like the other. One of these things just doesn't belong. So in some ways, it actually makes it, I think, but this is me as an outsider. You know what I'm saying? For me as an outsider, all I see is same, or like matchy, 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 different. And this is how we learn generally, right? Pattern matching is something that like three-year-olds and 4-year-olds get into, to be like, oh, blue goes with blue, or green goes with green, or the top of the top comes here and the bottom of the top connects. You know, we just look at things to synergize, you know. But internally it may function very differently.
Yeah, and the best cue I have is that my perception is that in most of these groups that are diverse, the people I see wanting to use pronouns the most are those that, you know, are probably using something that doesn't seem to match their what a lot of us would regard as their visual identity. The perceived visual identity. So you know, I'm just going to pick up that cue and be like, well, okay, then it seems valuable to them, so let's keep doing it. The thing you said though that's really interesting to me is the relational piece. I mean, at the end of the day, this feels like a shortcut. In addition to some of the things I've said, like about making them feel more included, or more safe, or just less triggered or traumatized, is the relational piece, and it is a shortcut for that. That doesn't remotely tell the story of who they are, or how they transitioned, or I mean, you know, none of that. It would be pretty dangerous and offensive to assume any of that.
Oh, for sure.
And so one thing I resonate with what you're saying, I think, is about, well, at the end of the day, it's about really developing a relationship and understanding how people want to be addressed. So that I put it, there's kind of this analysis of like just language and grammar and all of that. And then there's just a big category of how the hell does anybody want to be addressed? I mean, that's all that I think of it more in that term of associating even more with almost like a nickname, like, oh, do you prefer John or Jonathan?
Yeah.
For me, Andy and Andrew. So, and this relates a bit to the Jordan Peterson, you know, I think became infamous around his controversy related to this exact concept and the whole compelled speech business. And I think where I got tangled in that was, well, I can accept that. It's like, I can accept that, like let's not force somebody to call us by a pronoun. But I also believe that somebody shouldn't continue to call us by the wrong pronoun. Somebody shouldn't continue to address me in a way that I don't want to be addressed in any way, across any piece of language, name, pronoun, otherwise. And so it's like, okay, if you don't want to use the pronoun, then just call somebody by their name. Similarly, be like, you know, and teachers do this all the time, right? Like, what do you want to be called? So to me, and I don't want to go down the Jordan Peterson rabbit hole. We touch on it here and there, but it's like the ultimate third rail. But yeah, like to me, that's the thing that to me is important relationally, is just knowing somebody enough to know how they want to be addressed, and then respecting that.
Yeah. And then, well, but I think that this is because I'm not like that. So then, like, I've known people who've changed their names or whatever, like legally, and that's what they go by. And everyone they meet after, they say that, and that's their name. And I don't call them by those names. Like, I have a friend who changed her name from Lisa to Nova. I don't even know if people call her Nova. I just call her Lisa because that's how I was introduced to her. I know somebody else whose name was Steve Weagle. He changed his name to Nick Dorr. And then it's funny, like I remember at some point he corrected my dad. He was like, Steve, how are you doing? He's like, it's Nick. It's Nick. He was like, oh yeah, I mean, and then it's up to you. Like, there's no essential rudeness in that, because it's just like, if I change my name, it's up to you whether you want to call me by my new name or not. I mean, I don't presuppose any control over you, and maybe I could get mad about it, but that doesn't really make any ding dang sense. You know what I mean? Because it's not, if I rely on you to validate my reality, then it's not real, really. You know what I mean? Then it's so I think that's the hard thing is like with a pronoun. And this is the, I mean, I think we're getting to the thing where like I think this is so intensely religious because it is like it's a faith leap, that it'll be helpful, and it's a faith leap to say that it's worthy. Because like if I say, and this, I know people use these like silly examples all the time, but they're actually less silly than talking about fundamental categories because we're biological, like dimorphic species, right? So we are male and female. That's how we reproduce, and so it is essential. Like there, and people say, gender essentialism, is that like, isn't that what the term's called when you continue to link, you haven't unlinked, as people did in the whatever late 2000s, gender and biological sex. So sort of assuming that like conservative, you haven't changed with this particular movement. Then if I said, for example, I was like, oh, I need you to address me as master or black man or whatever, so like just use my name, just call me black man. And then, but you'd be like, well, but you're not a black man. Yeah, but just call me black man. What's your name though? Brendan McNamara. But I want you to refer to my pronouns are black man and black women or whatever, right? So that's plural. You womanize me, just as an example. And let's say that's how I identify. I think black lesbian is how I've identified in the past. But so I mean that sincerely, whenever I said that throughout college or whatever. And it's something I was like, oh, I kind of like something I was playing around with, I think in late teens, 20s. This is the hard thing though, is then, is it, you're stuck in a quandary, right? When someone says that, who you love, or just it's a stranger who you're trying to love, because that's the impetus, right? I think for both of us, how do I love this person? Mm-hmm. How do I love this person who says this thing? And if I can't perceive it as reality, then I can't lovingly say it. You know what I mean? And then, or I then have to police. I have to kind of police my own language. I literally have to alter how I speak overall to not use pronouns in the way that I speak about this one person. So then I cease using pronouns in general when I speak about any people. So you're asking me to rearrange, and I'm a reader too. So you're asking me to rearrange the entire English language and how I speak in order to keep you comfortable. And that to me seems colonial, right? Because colonization generally is a small group of people coming in and saying that the everyone else there has to start doing things differently, right? This is missionary work, right? 2 people come into a village. The village is filled with 400 people. And they say, well, no, this is the truth. And they don't demand it. They don't say, well, yes, God is your father. And if you don't say that, we're going to yell at you or whatever. That would be bad missionary work. But you would, over time, try to convince them and teach them of it and then see what God does about that. But if you, this is, I think, the thing. This is where I'm going to get back to colonialism. The sort of any demand, even on an individual level, is a form of colonialism, right? If you take the minority and then try to impose the minority position on the majority, and if they don't do it, you punish them to some degree, which happens in woke and has happened absolutely in the history of every religion, Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, Christianity, like every single religion has persecuted, has persecuted those both in the minority and the majority. So that's the interesting thing. Like it's a form of colonialism to then demand that your reality or the reality of a smaller group than the larger group kowtow to you and start using your language. That's like when the British came in and they stopped 200 British soldiers comes into part of Ireland with 50,000 Irish people. And they're just like, yeah, don't speak that language anymore. You have to speak our language. You can't speak Irish. And so I think that's a lot of the resistance too, which is like, you're trying to I feel as though someone's trying to colonize me, when I'm like, that's not how it is. That's not how we do it. That's not how the Irish do it. So why would I ever have to do it how you do it? And you're like, well, that's how we do it in England. So if you don't do it like an English person to me, then ultimately, this is cool too, because this happens in both like bad missionary work and colonialism. The impression is, if you don't do this, you're a bad person. You're an uncivilized race. So for example, if I don't call someone and again, markers are sort of helpful, but especially when you're in person, it's way harder because you can smell the difference between a man and a woman. We have senses beyond sense to figure out who's a man or a woman. So that's why when people say a pronoun that's different than I can perceive, I get locked because I was like, wait a second, are you wrong or am I wrong? We're not both right. Like it's not, like it's, you know what I mean? Like either my senses are wrong or your senses are wrong. and I don't know. And I'm going to default to me, which is probably arrogant, but that's just, I think, how human beings work, or how I work, which is like, if I don't know, I'm going to go ahead and assume I'm right, because that's how I've kept myself alive till the age of 44. But yeah, I don't know. I think that's I think this is why the resistance to it, and this is why I think it can be harmful in the colonial, bad missionary, cultish way. And pronouns, I think, are a good example of it. That could be like, but at the same time, like I said, I say all that, and I know some people are like, "F you, you're the colonizer," and then here we are calling each other names. But I just straw man that. But at the same time, I fully recognize, and that's why I said out loud previously, and I'll repeat it now so people who are listening don't get super irritated, that on a one-to-one basis, I also completely understand the paradigm with which you spoke to someone else and were like, oh, I didn't perceive that, but you told me it's that. Here, let's just do that. Let's just congress that. Just like, I think, though, when some missionaries come in or the English came in, some people were eager to please the English. They were like, oh, look how civilized these English are. Look at how they make tea. We make tea in a big bucket. That's crazy. And then the tea that gets cold, they make tea and pour it into a little thing. Maybe you immediately are like, oh, this makes perfect sense. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do tea like the English do. Anyways.
It's a yes and concept. It's really an improv thing, right? Like,
yeah.
I'm going to pick up.
Yeah.
Pick up that way.
Yeah. And colonialism, if everyone just yes-anded, would have always worked, because the colonizer makes the initiation, and it's really only when resistance is met and people go, we don't like that. That's when they go, oh, well, if you don't like that, we kill you and all your children.
Well, I actually looked up this because I mentioned this earlier, and I'm not sure I totally did it justice, but this definition of coloniality from the book Hospice and Modernity by Vanessa Mercado de Oliveira, and I hope that's close. And actually, I want to tag name pronunciation in a second. And I don't know that this is an exact quote, but it's pretty close from some notes in a book group I'm in. Modernity is interchangeable with coloniality. This term reminds us that the benefits of modernity are created and maintained by inherently violent and unsustainable practices. Modernity cannot exist without expropriation, extraction, exploitation, militarization, dispossession, destitution, genocide, and ecocide. Conquest is the driving force of modernity, just like colonialism. And one thing when you were talking, I was like, oh, this reminds me a little bit of our anti-racist discussion, because it's like, when it's a lot of that for you was like, well, yeah, but it seems like the opposing force or the revolutionary force is the same thing in reverse. And I think that's a similar pattern here that we're questioning is like, okay, but is this moving us forward? Is this helping people express themselves or emerge, or all of us learn how to love each other? I love that part of what you brought in. I think that could be hell. That could be just the theme for all of this.
That's it. And that's what I hope. That's what I would commend everyone to be trying to do. How do I best love this person should be the first flipping. And that's the question I get caught up at a flipping grocery store line. Wait, how do I best love this person? I don't know. And that's hard. I mean, that's not an easy thing to solve always,
So I think and I don't want to like speak too much from a book I'm just starting, but it matches with a lot of, I think, why I tend to grab onto these newer concepts is just, I think there's so much that's dysfunctional about the way we function as a certainly a Western civilization. I know some people want to cancel that phrase, but I'm not sure about that yet. I think we talk about this. I'm like, well, the motherland's in the middle, Africa's in the middle, and then it's east, west. I know it's a globe. I get it. I know it's a globe. I know east goes around the globe. But anyway, separate conversation. But this thing of like, well, something massive has to change here. I mean, just look at the way we use plastic. I don't know, something very tangible like that, right? It's just horrific. And it's like to me, like let's stick put a stick in any piece of this system and try to crack it open, because something really massive has to shift. And if it doesn't, I think we both are chatting quite a bit about what's emerging for a while now, but it's becoming maybe a rumble is heading into a roar around Civil War, right? Like that doesn't
Yeah.
seem that far out.
Yeah, we're at the halfway point, right? I think we're right before the tipping point of where more than half the country thinks we're heading towards civil war. I think it's like 46%, some like Gallup poll or whatever. Maybe not Gallup, but I've been reading Gallup polls this week, so I just think everything's a Gallup poll. But whatever, there was like a massive poll done, as was reported in the news. Although always interesting to see who reports that, but because I think many news organizations are part and parcel, it's like fomenting that, because the more you can foment that, the more you can sell papers and clicks and all that sort of thing. Yeah, that's the thing. It's trying to, I think woke is a new religion. It's a revolutionary sect. But as with any revolutionary sect, you're always trying to identify, are these people as bad or worse than the people they're trying to supplant, you know? And I don't think, like, I think colonialism essentially, or domination, is literally how human beings work. So I don't think, maybe that's, what's the word? Too cynical or whatever. But I was like, oh, that'll never change. And this makes sense for critical race theory too. This will never change by like incremental legal battles. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? And it won't change by any sort of like changing systems. You know what I mean? So then you can't just like change policy. Is not going to change this. Policy isn't going to change who people are. Any language. I mean, I love language, man, and I think language is really powerful. But I was like, I don't think language is going to change that fundamental a nature of people, because people groups internally, even without all the isms that we have always done this. They've always dominated. You know what I mean? Like, you know, Chinese people dominated other Chinese people, white people dominated other white people. Like, obviously I grew up Irish. So to me, if you looked at Irish and English people, other than the lip shape or whatever, and they're on separate islands, so they do have distinct visual features. That was people who looked from a distance. I don't know why those people are trying to kill each other, and one was very specifically trying to dominate the other. So we know in our culture, you know, it can play out maybe in ways that are resemble intersectional thought, but like we can't, you know, like that's, again, this is, but of course I'm a Christian though, right? So then the change must be internal and eternal. So then, and it can't come from you. Like, I can't make it happen. I can't do a bunch of things. I can't make the magic spell. I can't say the right words to then make it happen. And I can't transform society at all, really, in and of myself, other than out of my individual behavior. And maybe the problem is if I can just say things and convince other people. This is the constant war with like evangelicalism in general. My saying things is not going to change anyone's mind. I've ceased to believe in the Aaron Sorkin worldview that a big speech is going to change people's minds. Maybe it used to be possible too. Maybe it's just changed over time. Like 7 years ago, maybe convinced a ton of people when people were receiving that way. But information comes in too many conduits now, and so it might just not be possible to change people's minds via speech, except those whose minds are able to be changed by a speech, which means those people whose minds are able to be changed by speech will simply have their minds changed again by the next convincing speech that they hear. And that's not a sustainable system of change at all. You know what I mean? Without, again, the force. And that's what I see woke already using, and it's a brand new religion. They're already using force in terms of castigation, like excommunication, and they even use it against people who aren't within. You know what I mean? Like we saw in the Senate hearing, literally like accuse someone essentially of hate and being essentially, I think, transphobic. For most people, it's like, it just means bad person, because it doesn't mean an irrational fear of trans people. That's just not like, I don't know anybody who's irrationally afraid of trans people. But maybe they exist. I'm sure. Listen, I'm not saying they don't exist. I'm sure there's someone out there who's literally trembling hearing me mention it. But since the revolution is already using that level of attack in ways that I don't find sustainable, because I'm a Malcolm X fan, right? I was not an MLK fan. I was a Malcolm X fan. And he was like, if you come for me, if you come for my family with guns, we will have guns and we will use those guns. And I was like, heck yeah. I was a John Brown fan. John Brown was like, they're enslaved down there. Me and my crazy troop of white sons are going to go and free slaves. I was like, heck yeah. You know what I mean? Because I can see the harm, but I think since a lot of the harms we're talking about are theoretical, that we can see the manifestations of, you know what I mean? It's like we can see the tops of the waves, so we know the currents may exist. But since the harm isn't there, like I don't think of language as harm, or violence or whatever. But if you can classify words as violence, then you can say, look at all this violence that's going on. So it is like slavery. So it is like the Holocaust. So it is like these things that we know, or, what Malcolm X fought against when people were being like literally physically moved and beaten and hung. And you know what I mean? You're like, oh, okay, well, but also the pragmatic, do you wait until that happens? But anyway, so I was like, so woke anyway just seems more more angry and attacking. They're like I think woke is trying to be a revolutionary force. And I think sometimes it's funny because people in the woke thing don't recognize that. And I think that's, we should go ahead and notice that it's like, no, you're trying to break things. You're trying to smash. I mean, listen, some people have come out and say smash the patriarchy or whatever, right? That's no, they
nobody's shy about that in my circles.
yeah. But externally, I think people are just like, when I interact with people, they just simply respond to with incredulity that I wouldn't simply agree with them, that I wouldn't just think like they think, do how they do, say what they say. And that part, I was just like, that doesn't just even make any interpersonal sense. You know what I mean? Where it's like, you have to convince me of everything.
And that, I'm with that. Like the idea that we're just going to assume that all of humanity should just shift overnight just because, a group figured out that this, let's even assume it's a better way of being.
Yeah.
Like, no, like behavioral change, it's just it doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
You can't assume it will. I don't think that's gonna get us where we need to be.
One
thing, that book, The Dawn of Everything, a lot of the point of that, the authors look at all these different egalitarian societies over time, and or cultures, and it's not even, part of their point is that even the idea of labeling an entire culture or time period as one thing is part of what's wrong with how we look at history.
Sure. Yeah.
And what was fascinating was the quote unquote egalitarian cultures, they weren't even that way all the time. What seemed to be the most valuable was that they were able to shift between, say, hierarchy and even dominance to egalitarianism based on the need. So like it's harvest season. Like there are, and this, I've studied this pretty deeply in kind of the corporate realm of like hierarchy and collaborative systems.
Oh yeah.
And the reality is there are use cases for hierarchy. There are times when hierarchy is good,
sure,
or efficient, and that can be good depending on the need, such as harvesting food, or at the extreme end of that would be a military incursion, or maybe something in the middle would be like an operating room where you better know that the surgeon is in charge when it's a life and death situation, and you have seconds, not hours. And in a lot of other cases, when we're talking about decision making that's going to last years, like, okay, that's I think when we need to be more collaborative. But the key there is, can we build an overall more collaborative, or dare I say democratic system that can still have hierarchies exist at certain times for the right reasons, and then even rotate the leadership. One of the ways they said a lot of those cultures worked was they just knew the dangers of it, which I think we're embroiled in now because we're blind to the dangers, or we don't like to talk about the dangers, or it just gets drowned out because there's so many, we're just discussing things in every direction.
So many dangers. Yeah.
But there seemed to be something inherent within their understanding of like, oh, well, this person's going to be in charge of the harvest this season, and it's going to be somebody different next season. So it seems like, so in a way, yes, I do think dominance is an inherent danger that humans go into if we just accept hierarchy and there's just one person in charge. Well, we see what that's happening, and then it's arguably we're actually leaning more towards authoritarianism. I think you were even pulling some research about that.
We are.
But back then, it was, in these specific examples, it was like they understood that, and it'd be a rotational, leadership. And I've experienced this in kind of a micro way, like even in my men's group, it's like somebody different leads it every time, and it's extraordinarily healthy. Like as a little culture within our little container, it feels really tight. It feels really accountable. And when it's been helpful for me, actually, as somebody who I've been in a leadership position, for a lot, most of my career, but I've also sort of shy about totally taking the reins. And I think that's a danger spot, this weird middle ground of like, we say we're not a hierarchy, but we're still really functioning that way because
Sure.
we've all grown up in hierarchies, whether our families or schools or work or, so it's just in us deeply. So that's something I challenge even in some of the, like mutual aid communities I'm in, where we just sort of announce one day that we're a flat, horizontal system, but we've not actually built any structure or accountability or necessarily rules for that. And a lot of people probably haven't done a lot of deep kind of untangling of the shadow that all of us bring related to hierarchy. So anyway, that's going to spiral off into a whole thing, and I could define shadow another time. I do want to say one thing though.
Yeah.
We are canceling the word crazy. I've heard you use it a couple times, and I just, as a representative of the woke religion, we're not supposed to say that.
Oh, we're canceling crazy. Oh, I love crazy. It's one of my favorite. I mean, it's one of my favorite CeeLo songs ever. I mean, that Gnarls Barkley song, "Crazy," so good. Oh yeah. Oh gosh.
Oh, and they covered it in the new Moulin Rouge musical. It's an excellent version.
Oh yeah. Or you can just do the woke thing and just add a letter to it. Just call it K, crazy with a K or whatever, or crazy X, whatever. You can just add. Yeah.
I thought you were going to go with K woke, quoke.
K woke, quoke. Well, it's interesting. This is and this comes up in the Christian quote unquote hierarchy. Is this interest, and I don't buy it because I've never bought it my whole life, so no one's ever convinced me of it yet, but maybe it can happen today. Leadership doesn't equal power, as far as I'm concerned. Like hierarchy, whoever's on the top doesn't have more power. Like the president doesn't have more power than me until he has violence to like make it powerful. Every piece of power that the president has is fiat other than violence. So power doesn't exist outside of the capacity for violence, as far as I'm concerned. And again, I felt this way pretty much by third grade, I'd say, third or fourth grade. I was like, wait, the teacher's not in charge in the classroom. I'm as in charge as they are. They're just seizing that control. So there's no power. Like if someone leads the harvest, that doesn't make them powerful. I just had this conversation about medical gaslighting with a couple of friends. It was like, doctors don't have power. They don't have any power we don't give them. So it's not real. It's not real. It's fiat currency. So there's no, again, this is how we can get into this intersectionality conversation. I was like, I don't have any power except the power that you give me. That's not real power. You know what I mean? That's not real until it's adjudicated with force. Like force is to me the only like power I really recognize as like, oh, okay, that's because then it's irresistible. In which case, okay, I have been overpowered. I'm not overpowered. Or logic has power. God's law has power. Like and this is the same thing with like if you're trying to figure out a flat hierarchy, right? That's not shifting the power dynamics. The power dynamics are exactly the same if this same person leads every week. Any power that's given is freely given away. If you submit to authority, you're freely giving your power away. So no one took it. You can only take, as far as I'm concerned, you can only take things by force. And I've been to schools that had spanks or whatever. That was really the only power they have. My daughter's a different child. She is like really concerned about being sent to the principal's office. She thinks getting in trouble is bad. I don't think that. Since third grade, I've not thought that. That's not real. And I've not been convinced otherwise. It's not real. And it just literally isn't. You know what I mean? It's given. So you gave them that power. Just take the power back. Well, then they get really, really mad. So what? Then they yell at me. They'll make me leave the school. How are they going to make you exactly? Unless they physically remove you, they can't make you leave the school. They have to physically lock you out. They have to do a thing. That's the only time that power really exists. So this is why any power to ever be accepted, like that's why violence exists ultimately. Is force. You know what I mean? So this is that's what's fascinating to me, of like, because I think that's another thing. I think that's part of the woke dynamic, though, is this constant thing of like, you have more power. And I was just like, again, this is another thing. This is why sometimes all these conversations we have to have multiple hour conversations about them, because that's a huge theory to say that people have more power. Like a doctor, when you go into a doctor's office, well, they have all the power in that situation. No, they don't. They don't have any more power than you at all. Like, it's just not true, you know?
Yeah, no, a couple things that I know we need to come in for landing.
Yeah.
Actually, what you just demonstrated was a coaching exercise I learned called the worst case scenario exercise, which you literally just keep asking, and then what would happen? And then what would happen?
Yeah.
And then, so I love that. I think at some point, power versus force, I know, is a whole pretty a body of work that I haven't gone super deep into, and I'm curious about.
Yeah.
And actually just reminded me, one of my mentors, in exploring just, deeper consciousness and these binary structures, and I don't just mean gender, just generally the way we hold binaries in our mind, talking about this phrase, like speak truth to power. There's a lot of words are powerful. I think we both agree with that.
Yeah.
And in that construct, it's giving away all the power. It's actually saying, in this moment, I have no power.
Yeah.
Because it's saying, if I'm speaking truth to power, it's not like saying, I don't know. Anyway, so that's something we can unpack. One thing I wanted to get just tagged maybe briefly is just name pronunciation, because I would come back to that. And one thing I notice is it bugs me when people like say a name, and I only speak one language. I'm very Anglo in that way, and I know that's not exactly the right terminology, but Eurocentric, and so certain names are just familiar, the colonial names, the English names, and then anything outside of that paradigm is I'm going to struggle more with. But what I notice is a lot of folks will try to pronounce a name and then be like, did I get that right? And I feel like it's much better to just ask. If it seems like a risk, like just be like, hey, how do you pronounce your name? Because why like take the risk of totally butchering somebody's name, which probably is at least annoying, if not offensive to them. Then just ask, right? And I just think that, to me, relates to a kind of maturity that I know I've been working on a lot in the last several years, which, because it's more vulnerable to ask. I think it's vulnerable to ask for help. It's vulnerable to admit what we don't know. I see you doing that in a way quite openly. Like, I think that's a lot of the way you operate, is you're actually always interrogating these things and always asking these questions. I do understand why maybe sometimes people receive the way you do that as being right or I don't know, forceful or something like that. But I receive it as like a genuine curiosity. That's what's brought us together here, right? It's like, so I wanted to tag that last little piece in. Maybe the final word.
To tag onto the tag, just that's an interesting thing. It's come up a lot this week. So I think a lot of people have a different definition of seeking understanding, the phrase seeking understanding, than I do. And this is why I keep running into problems. Seeking understanding is not like sitting in circle without crosstalk. I was like, I don't understand that way. I just literally don't learn that way. I've never learned that way. It's not enough, man. It doesn't give me everything that my brain requires to understand. So for me to understand means to, like, yes, have you share completely why you think the way you think, and then I'll share why the way I think. And then I'll have to figure out what's correct. So if someone says to me, and again, I live with someone who doesn't say her name correctly often, right? So Arti is not how, like, Arti is kind of more how you say it. That's not how she tells people to say it, but they'll say. So then when she says it, right, people mispronounce her name all the time. People have called me the wrong name most of my life. I don't care. I like those opportunities, because to me, the default polite thing to do is, oh, I don't care. How do you pronounce your name? Whatever, dude. So I think that's one of the things too, is also being raised in that system. And then people are like, no, there's a specific way. And if you don't do it, that makes me mad. I don't get that. My name has been mispronounced my whole life. People call me Brandon most of my life. Who cares? Again, they don't have any power of it. It doesn't change my name. You know what I mean? So then, but to me, understanding is then are we correct? Like, who's correct here? We have to determine that. And that is, if you don't have that, then I don't think you're even really pursuing understanding. You're just pursuing information. That's just knowledge. But like, how do you apply that knowledge? And is that knowledge accurate? Is the next thing. So I think that's what we're constantly exploring here. So we can use perspective and be like, oh, does that make sense? What makes sense? That makes sense. But using all of that, using all the understanding and knowledge we've put forth, how are we going to answer this question?
I think I've even said it a couple of times on this particular episode. I am a member of the woke religion. So
there you go.
Interesting to explore. Which implicitly means, yes, it's a religion.
for you, right? Yeah, for you, at least on an individual basis. So we've got one. Yes. And yeah, I think it is enormously. I'm still not 100% convinced, but I think my answer is default yes. So
well, I don't.
I'm in like a 75. I'm in a 75%. Heck yeah, It is absolutely religion. It might be a cult. It might even be colonialism. You know what I mean? But like, but I
Well,
don't. I have
yeah,
I have soft space. I have soft space because I don't. I haven't checked enough boxes. I've checked like 15 boxes, but I want to check more. You know, this because I'm a comprehensive person. Again, this is why even a pronoun is a difficult issue.
yeah.
There's
I
a lot
don't.
of
In
boxes.
fairness, I don't know that it's actually organized well enough to be religion, which is actually partially intentional.
Yeah.
But I'm glad you mentioned cult because I had meant to want to weave in a definition
Oh
from
yeah, yeah,
from that same mentor. I love
yeah.
this. It's like the way you know something is a cult is see how they treat you when you try to leave,
Oh yeah.
and that's really stuck with me. Like is it because there's a lack of respect for autonomy if we're gonna like, and it goes back to cancel culture and ostracizing people, kicking them out of the tribe, and that's I think part of our deepest fear.
Sure.
That's a survival thing. It's like
Yeah.
out of the tribe. So
Real quickly though, I mean, this is I guess how Christianity isn't a cult because Christianity it is so much easier. I got to tell you, within Christianity, when someone leaves Christianity, it's you just have an entirely different operating system and how you deal with them. But the dealing how you deal with people who say they're Christians, you have an entirely different, like in some ways harder, like a much harder way that you deal with those people than you deal
mhm.
with people who are, if you leave Christianity or outside Christianity, it's in actually in many ways, I would say even it is gentler. It is a gentler thing. So you treat people who leave superficially, almost in a way, quote unquote, better. I would say less loving, maybe in the grandest, in the most rigorous sense, but gentler, which is maybe I guess why people like there are cults that come out of Christianity for sure, like Jim Jones or whatever was like a Christian cult. Um, but wait, how does just briefly, how does that go? How does that go in your world? Like when people sort of depart from I say it sarcastically, like depart from the faith.
Yeah, good question. For me, I think it's actually more theoretical. I don't know how often I actually see people being treated badly when they leave something. I mean, I've certainly left some things and felt unappreciated or maybe never mentioned again, but that's pretty neutral in reality.
You mean what do you mean when you say leave thing like
Leave a
what?
group of people or like I was on a board of directors or I don't know, it's just
Yeah.
I'm just
Oh,
thinking
but yeah,
groups I've been involved with that where I've left and like how was I treated. That's I'm just making it very personal.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
I don't know. So to me, that what it's speaking to is not the neutral version of that, but the violent version of that, which is like, oh, we're gonna go out of our way to ostracize them. We're gonna go out of our way to maybe to like gossip and tear apart their reputation, so they can't interact with this group or other groups in the future, or that's
Yeah,
gonna
yeah.
undermine their resources in the world, or their ability to belong or find work or socialize or all kinds of things. So
Yeah,
so
or yeah, browbeat them, or even the trying to keep them from leaving too. I guess would sort of be part of it.
well, I think that's exactly it. It's the fear of being treated like that that gets people, that forces people, not forces, but encourages them strongly to stay in the cult because they know if they leave, maybe they've seen that happen to other people. And they're like, oh damn,
Sure.
I better stay in this cult or else, that's going to happen to me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So then, is there a version of because you're in it, right? You're in a bunch of groups, right? And so I don't know. Each group would be kind of the equivalent, maybe of a home group in Christianity. I'm trying to like just do like a correlation to my own religious uh scheduling or then and then like I don't know whenever I was on the Joe Rogan thing, someone was like DEI conferences or like church, like big church gatherings, or that would be more like a church conference, but maybe the lot bigger groups you're in would be more like churches. But then like do you know anybody, and this is interesting too, be like nobody leaves the religion, or if it's like Judaism, you literally can't leave, you're still a Jew, even if you don't practice or whatever, I don't know. Like do you know anybody who has left, like who has literally like sort of abandoned the ethos? Like that happens in Christianity. People like put videos up and they're like, I no longer identify as a Christian.
Oh
I'm no
yeah,
longer part of the church, visible or invisible. Like people who leave, and then how do people
sure.
snipe at that person? Like, does that happen at all?
Well, I mean, a month ago I was at this restorative justice conference, and one of the keynotes was a preacher. So
Yeah.
that felt religious-y.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I was involved with this film company, 137 Films, and
Yeah.
another one of our college roommates was as well. And the last film we did was about young Earth creationists in the Creation Museum in Kentucky. And we interviewed somebody who had left that religion, and that was, you know, pretty fascinating just to kind of see his story and see him kind of unpacking, like, you know, which he considered to be a kind of indoctrination of what he was learning. I'm reminded of that, which is on film. Go check it out. It's called "We Believe in Dinosaurs." Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't actually think I have seen it as much personally, or you know, I mean, I think it's actually one of the virtuous things about how these mutual aid communities are essentially organized as anarchist networks, because I have floated between some of the different, you know, branches or like spokes of that network, and you know, in that way, I've kind of wondered, oh gee, do those people think I abandoned them or whatever? But it's not like anybody came to me and said, hey, like, they didn't even ask a question, why did you leave? Or that's, you know, I think we actually hold to that part of the ethos pretty well, at least in this mutual aid network in Chicago. I where people float between different parts of it, and pretty fluidly. I think that's actually pretty healthy. So yeah, I mean, as I'm talking through that definition of cult, I'm like, oh gee, I guess I haven't seen much of that in my own life.
But what I'm saying, I think the cult thing would be activated most when you leave, not a church, right? Like, because like when people leave a church, no one even talks about it or whatever. In like, let's say in a religion, right? So I think that would be more religious than culty. But then if you try to leave, like in this case, if like, is the religion a cult? Like if you try to leave Scientology at all, like you know what I mean, then you obviously that can even be, that's even less about like when you go to certain places. But if you try to leave the whole thing, that's kind of when the claws come out, you know what I mean? Or when I was speaking about Christianity dying out. So I would say, but listen, you might not know anybody. I'm not trying to press to like you make somebody up, but like, do you know anybody who's literally like divested themselves from the movement entire and been like, yeah, guys, I don't believe it. Like, I would assume this would have to happen at some point. If you've been in it for years, at some point, someone's been like, yeah, I don't really buy all this stuff anymore. I don't believe it.
Well, there's an example coming up, and this is actually very, very fresh for me. One of my groups is called Organizing White Men for Collective Liberation. And I don't actually love that brand name, but I believe in what to me it stands for, which is those of us who are lightly melanated and male, just an affinity group for us to do our own interrogation and of the power and privilege we hold, and as well as to organize ourselves in activist ways. And that, you know, we're pretty deeply embroiled right now. One branch of that I'm involved with in you know, trying to figure out why we haven't had a lot of stickiness. You know, we've had some people come for a little while and go, and some of that was just wrapped up with the pandemic and George Floyd, and you know, all of the, I mean, there was so much more activism, you know, happening 2 years ago than now in that way, marches and protests and all that. But I think part of our dysfunction is that I think when men have left this group, some other men have like not handled that well. That they've accused them of, you know, I think the belief is kind of like, well, if you're not in this group, then you're not doing your work. Or if you're not in this group, you're not doing it the right way. Or if you're not in this group, you're not serious about, you know, interrogating this particular definition of white maleness and unpacking it and you know, all the things. And I'm not very attracted to that. I don't think that's healthy, and I don't think that. I think the metrics are pretty obvious where people don't leave. I mean, that's or they don't stay. Sorry, and for very long. And then even when they do come back, we had a bit of a regathering recently, and we're starting to get a little more momentum. But even when people came back, some men were kind of asking, the tone of asking wasn't like, "Hey, welcome back. Where you been?" It was like, "Hey, where you been?" Just like there's like accusatory kind of tone to it. So that I'm still embroiled in that. I'm trying to sort that out and just even feel into like, well, what's really here, what wants to be here. It's challenging, and I still don't know exactly how that's going to work out, or even like what my place is in it. Is it like worth trying to bring, I think, some of these ideas in to build a healthier culture that's not a cult, that can kind of withstand, that is resilient to the idea of people coming and going without taking offense to it, or needing to sort of tear them down, or just simply leaning into the curiosity, like, no, like, where you been? Like,
yeah.
Really, I'm open. Like, did you have a family thing, or do you not care about this anymore, or was this not the right vibe, or did you find another group, or there's a million reasons.
Yeah.
Somebody may leave a group.
Yeah, like an exit interview.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that one,
Okay.
maybe I'll report back how that whole discussion goes, but it's been
It's
been challenging, to say the least.
It would be interesting, to answer that question and be like, I don't know if I buy this anymore. And then like that's what I'm super curious about. Like, but I guess depending, again, because it being sort of decentralized, then for many people may feel no need to renounce. And you wouldn't really know until you interacted with them and started talking about something, and they started saying something that was like anathema, to any sort of mutually held tenets or whatever. Anyway, super interesting, and I hope helpful to people listening, as a way to kind of reckon with whatever way you're thinking. To go, oh wait, and try it on as a worldview. If we're both kind of inclining that, let's try woke as religion on for the next couple weeks, whether you're in or outside of it, and see if that can help you more easily perceive every single person you're communicating with as a person that you are able to love.
I would love to hear about people trying that.
I would like that too. And if you don't love, you're out.
Only lovers.
All right. I love you.
I love you. Talk to you soon.